to start the stream.
Would you? Oh, good.
Oh, I gotta turn my camera off. No, run away.
You can tell he's not old if he can start the stream like that.
I know.
He's giggling away. Like, at least I make people laugh. That's if nothing else.
You should be seeing it within the next few seconds.
All right. Now I should be.
We're not
right
talking
like
about
that.
streams again.
I should
are
be
we?
there, right, Ryan?
Yeah, but
I
you got to keep refreshing it if you want to see it.
Oh.
So usually I would just like close the app entirely, then go in.
All right.
So if I do that and do River Hauntings, it is there. You should be
All
able to
right.
find it.
I'm coming up now. Here we
are
go.
live.
I got is latest from here. Hold on. Oh, there. Hold on here. I do not have me. Oh, we are live right now. It looks like
We are live.
Excellent.
So
We're live.
I'm doing
You
this.
can
I'm gonna
begin whenever your heart feels like doing it.
It looks like we got several folks out there. Yep, there we go. I'm just looking. I can now see the list, so I know who's asking questions. Looks like we have 4 people out there already. So let's kick this off, ladies and James. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On the Air with Indian River Hauntings. I believe, Chris, this is our 15th episode. So
excellent.
Want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm Larry Lawson, your host. Joining me as my co-host, my dear friend Chris Huff in County Durham, England. Say hi to everybody, Chris.
You don't want to know how much I paid him to say that.
And
you're
Larry Lawson,
getting paid?
I'm coming. Ooh. Yeah, well, I want to know from where.
It's in bottles of Hobgoblin.
There you go. And of course, Larry, I'm Larry, and I'm down in Vero Beach, Florida, in the good old USA. And engineering this broadcast is my son Ryan up at his place in Orlando, Florida. So we're coming across the pond to everybody that's listening. So grateful that you're with us tonight. Before we get started, just want to remind you, if you haven't yet subscribed, because there's some things coming up with subscribing that we're going to talk about a little bit later in a few episodes, but also hit subscribe, hit like, hit that little bell on there. That'll tell you when it is we're on the air so you can catch all the great content. So really appreciate everybody being here tonight. It's been a little chilly here in Florida. We reached, how cold was it up there in Orlando today, Ryan? Fahrenheit.
Today it was in the 70s, but at night it drops to the 50s.
Oh, really terrible.
Yeah,
terrible.
We got up to 75 today. And Chris, what is it in England, in your neck of the woods?
Well, it reached a total of 38.5 Fahrenheit today at midday.
And we've got
it's down to about 36 now.
Yeah, a big part of our country is also really, really cold now too. But
yeah, it's down to about 69. Yeah.
No, not in Florida. Florida, it's pretty nice. We had a gorgeous day here, but up in the middle part of our country, it's pretty.
I can imagine it's winter's kicking in.
It's starting to. Want to take a couple minutes to give shout outs to some of our friends out there. And if you're on the air, I see there's 5 of us, 5 watching. Let me see who we got here tonight. We got Dan Squatch is time slipping in. So Dan Clarkson with us, Commanding Judge Dredd, Your Honor, always good to see you. And we got a few other people that are watching. So if you're on there, let me know so I can say hello to you. Also want to say happy birthday to a couple of folks. First is our friends at War Party Paranormal down in West Palm Beach, Florida. 5th anniversary of their organization day, so happy birthday. And one of their prize members, John Zapp, is having a birthday today. So Zapp, happy birthday. Want to say hi to our buddy, Ike Inzi for IDK Paranormal. If you really want to watch an interesting show, I'm a police officer. Ike's a police officer, soon to be retired. Great cop stories that go along with the paranormal. Check out his website, IDK Paranormal. He's a great guy, great stories. His daughter's pretty funny too. So when we're going to be getting to our
when she's allowed a word in edgeways.
When she's Did you catch that one, Ike? Who else do we got here? I want to say hi to our friends at Paradolia Brewery in Sebastian, Florida. Hi to Pete and all the gang there. Hoping to be back to see you soon. Doodlebug Dowsing, Nikki and Sherry up in Orlando that do all of our dowsing rods, and you're going to be hearing more about them on this episode or on this show in upcoming episodes. And of course, our dear friend Damien Freddy in York, England, best storyteller in the middle part of England. We're looking forward to coming back and seeing you as we put together our upcoming trip. Yes, our trip for folks to join us to investigate jolly old England. So we're looking forward to that. Now,
and Scotland, don't forget
Scotland. Oh, yeah, we talked about that, Scotland. Now,
don't forget there's 4 kingdoms. The United Kingdom is 4: England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Wales.
See, folks, not only do we talk about ghosts in the show, but you get the geographic
You get
lessons.
geography. You get history and geography.
History and geography. You got some shout outs for us there, old buddy?
Not really. Paul's online, as I've heard. So, hiya,
yep,
Paul. Is Deborah online? She said she was going to try and tune in.
She just popped
Deborah
in.
just popped up. Hey, Deb.
She's just back from work, so she's going to be tired.
Okay,
and why she bothers listening to my crap, I don't know. But hey, thank you, Deborah.
You know, I was thinking the same thing there.
I know you were. I can tell. I can always tell. It's that look you get.
Yeah. Beer challenge time, and we've all got something for Ike tonight. So our friend Ike Inzi with IDK Paranormal hit me with a big one, man. Did you see that stuff that the judge he had in his show?
Yeah,
12%.
12%. As I wrote, he's going to go blind. Man. That's good old boy beer, isn't it? Good old boys. We brew this in our jug straps. God, the show is not drink 12%.
This show is not for children, by the way. I want to make that really clear right now. Yeah, Ike, I think you got me beat on that, dude. That was some heavy duty stuff, and I got to tell the judge we're impressed. I'm going to do mine real quick, and then Chris has got something he's going to share with you. But I've got stuff. It's not local. This is from out of Washington State. It's called Elysian Space Dust IPA. It's a mere 8.2%.
That's pretty bad. Yeah.
But it's got a Citrilla and Amarillo in it, and it's kind of it's got a kind of an interesting taste to it. A little bit of a bite. It's actually pretty good. Ike likes to rate them, so I'm going to give this one, with this taste, I'm liking it at about a 7. It's not bad at all.
So it's not bad.
No, it's got a bite to it, but it's not so heavy you can't drink it and enjoy it. So Elysian Space Dust out of, where is it? It's bottled in Seattle. Got some friends of mine up in that neck of the woods. So Elysian Space Dust IPA, very, very good. So I just wanted to. Now, Chris, what do you got for us in the world of beer?
Well, we're starting off. We're starting off with one of these, which I'd never even heard of. Don't know if you can see that. No, probably not.
Yeah, I got a little bit. Hold it still. Something ale is all I could say.
It's made by Harper's, and it's called Toffee Ale. And it's a 4.8, which is quite a nice strength. And it's bizarre.
How is it bizarre?
Well, it certainly tastes like sort of toffee apple, really, but not as sweet. It is absolutely bizarre. I think we'll go for about a 5.5 on this. It's
okay.
But have no fear. I mean, for when I finish that, I can take the taste away with one of them.
Hobgoblin. This is some of the beer Ryan and I enjoy in England, and Ryan just found some that's imported, and he found it in Orlando, so he's going to be bringing that home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, but tell him how much a bottle it is. Come on.
Yeah, it's gonna be about $5 a bottle.
Ouch.
And Dan, I'm not gonna repeat what you wrote, dude. Okay, this is a family show, so I'm not gonna repeat. No, because nobody wants. Never mind. Nobody. Never mind, Dan. Come on, Dan. Clean it up, buddy.
Following up on what you said, Chris, about crotch beer.
Say what?
All right.
All right. On with the show tonight, folks. We got Chris and I have been talking, and we've got a couple of subjects that we've touched on before in previous shows, and we kind of want to bring it out again, folks. We'd like to get your thoughts on them also, and it's two kind of separate subjects. One is time slips. The other one is going to be synchronicity, and synchronicity, tomato.
You tomatoes. Tomato.
Tomatoes. Why?
Tomato.
Oh, okay. Dan got me back. Chris said brood on a jock strap. He did. So Dan said, okay, this will make Danny happy. Nobody wants crotch beer. Oh, I get what you're talking about, Dan. Okay, here we're just a little
You
bit
do?
behind there. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
you mentioned. Yeah. Sorry, Danny. My fault. Okay. Where do you want to go first with this one? Do you want to talk about synchronicity? Do you want to talk about what's your thoughts?
Dealer's choice. Go for it.
Well, this whole bit of time slips really has me intrigued
Mhm.
because some people, and I think you're one of those, have a really clear feeling that a time slip is paranormal. While I'm not so sure that it's not a scientific, almost natural event, when you look at some of the things that Einstein talked about in his theories of special and general relativity. And I just find that whole whole subject incredibly interesting because I personally had a time slip uh, situation. It happened about a year and a half ago. And, my first thought was I must have drifted off or dazed or something. But I was actually driving northbound on US 1 coming up from Stewart. And I suddenly was in a different spot. And
Mhm.
I had no recollection of the time before. I wasn't tired. It was middle of the day. Um, and I lost like 5 minutes.
That's not a time slip. That's a time loss.
Well, but if you look at a time slip, I grant you, but it's still under the same context. Something happened, and this is where I wonder whether or not this is a scientific issue, because when you look at Einstein's theories that have been since proven with the string theory, and if you want to look that up, guys, the string theory of all this, it talks about vibration and frequency, and how gravity and everything wraps around us. Um, so I just find it very interesting. But you feel that time slips, things like that, are strictly paranormal. There's some folks that think also that it's alien related.
Isn't it always
It,
aliens?
it, if sorry.
What did you say, Ryan?
No, I'm just making a joke.
All right.
Well, speak up
It's
if you're
not
gonna
fair. I
get.
can't. Yeah, speak up, man. Speak up. No, time slips and time loss are very different. Um, the classic time slip is probably the Petit Trianon of the Miss Moblies in the 1900s.
1901 in
Yeah,
Versailles.
at the
Yeah,
Palace of Versailles. I
yeah.
mean, everybody knows this one, so I'm not going to go into all the details, but that's probably the classic where they actually go back through and they walk around the gardens, and
Hmm.
when they come back, everything's back to normal. Jung himself had one of these time slips in the tomb of Galla Placida, one of the Roman empresses.
Hmm.
He went there. He noted it was a sort of blue color inside, and he thought this was brilliant. And when he came out, he talking to his female companion at the time, who also saw this blue tomb. They said they'll buy some postcards when they came out, but when they came back out to the shop area, they couldn't find any postcards. It was a completely different tomb.
Hmm.
The tomb that they saw was actually burnt down in I can't remember, 7th century, 8th century. But
Hmm.
he is adamant that what he saw was this blue tomb, not the modern one. So he actually stepped back through time to see it.
Now,
He's not
there's
lost. He's not lost any time. He actually
okay.
went back and he's come back to the normality. He's just stepped through, stepped back.
Right.
Now
Well, I've read.
I've got a personal account which is even more bizarre. We were walking back from a nice hostelry, and no, I hadn't had an absolute amount, just a couple of pints because we'd been investigating beforehand on one part of this area, gone through to St Margaret's, and then walked back via another route. Past an old barrow, walked across another field, come up onto a top, and we were on this old track. Now, this old track I've actually found some Roman pottery by the side of, so it gives you an idea of the age of this thing.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, the air shimmered, and that's the only way I can put it. The air shimmered, and it felt very peculiar. And then for me, it turned from night, because this was about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, into daylight, absolutely bright daylight. Birds were singing, insects were buzzing, and there was this squeaky, squeaky, rumble, rumble noise. And then down the track, I could see coming right towards me was a 2 oxen drawn cart with solid wooden wheels, with two men on. No, sorry, one old man and a boy on, and the boy was in a sky blue sort of Romanish tunic, coming towards me in this rickety cart, which then all of a sudden faded, just went. The whole thing went, and everything went back to normal. Now, my friend who was with me said he felt the atmosphere change completely, but he didn't see anything and he didn't hear anything. But he noticed when it changed for what I was saying turned into day, and then he noticed when it turned back into our nighttime and we walked home.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I say this is a paranormal thing.
Okay. Now, and I've got a friend of mine, and I won't mention her name because I don't have permission to tell her story on here, but she is a psychic, and she lives in our area, generally speaking. She talked about walking out of a restaurant with a friend and modern times, and walked out of the restaurant into probably early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at each other. They both realized they weren't where they were supposed to be, and I believe they walked back in the restaurant, and everything returned to normal. There's
Mm-hmm.
also an interesting story in 1971 of a cop. It was in England, a retired policeman that was shopping with his wife, and I can't remember exactly where it was in England, but ended up wanting to go to a bookstore. Went to that bookstore only to suddenly have a van drive in front of him and honk its horn, but it was a 1950s van. And suddenly the bookstore was now a women's clothing store. And there
Mm-hmm.
was a woman standing next to him wearing modern dress. They're kind of looking at each other, and they both walk into the store only to have it immediately change back into the bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Great examples of time slips. And I want to make mention to folks out here, and most of you probably already know this, but there's a difference between a time slip and the theory of time travel. Time
Mhm.
travel is a deliberate event, something that is being done purposely by a person, whereas time slips are accidental, and normally they occur when you're not really you're aware of your surroundings, but you're not necessarily concentrating on them, and they just change out. So that's a big difference. Um, I've also read stories, Chris, about loss of time being involved in this.
Mhm.
Now, uh, Einstein theorized, and it's been proved in modern times, the faster you go, the time slows down. The slower you go, time goes faster. Um, and they talk about the fact that we can't really travel at light speed because it would crush us, because once we hit light speed, our mass would be infinite as well as the speed would be infinite. So there's all kinds of theories that we could talk about and get ourselves way too deep in the woods. But it does tend to make sense with these time slippages. What tell me exactly why you think, I'm more curious. I'm not sure. Why do you think it's paranormal as compared to, for lack of a better term, scientific?
For the first thing that I'll say is anything paranormal is just science that we don't understand.
Fair answer. Okay. Okay.
So, but we don't understand it, so therefore it can't be encompassed within scientific terms.
But
One day, I'm convinced that all of this will be understood somehow,
I agree
and
with you
it will
there.
become mainstream science. But at the moment, science denies that this even exists.
Well, but see, I don't think that they do. If you, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of, so there's several scientists out there now that actually have been studying this, and have found that there's ways to travel back in time, but they're not convinced you can go forward in time. Um, but there's actually, I think there is science out there that is trying to prove the validity of this. And that's where I'm wondering, and I get what you're saying about paranormal being stuff that we don't understand, but I think there's movement towards that. Look at the big the it's in France, CERN in Switzerland rather, where they've got the big atom collider. They've done some work there on this, and there's some scientists there that have done some work on it. That's why I'm wondering, is it paranormal? Is it just these dimensions that that have been talked about? Like Einstein talked about 4 dimensions, the 3 dimensions that we know are width, length, and depth. But then there's the fourth dimension of my mind just went blank again.
Time.
Speed, time. Thank you. But currently, with the string theory, they're saying there's actually 6 other
Some
dimensions.
have postulated there's up to 22 dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, I think it's infinite. There are infinite dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we haven't even got it's very much like when I go off and do what I do, and then I'm trying to describe what I'm seeing to someone who hasn't seen what I've seen, and there just aren't words to describe what I've seen, because I cannot tell you the color, because the color is a bluey, grainy, grey, green, blue with silver.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a color. And all the time I'm trying to say this, and then if I'm trying to describe someone that I see, and 1 second they're 60 years old, the next second they're 8 years old, then they're 45 years old, then they're 25, and it's what's going through their mind that they're projecting their form. So somebody says, "Well, who's there?" And I'll say, "Oh, I've got a 45-year-old woman, and she's wearing, and it's changed. Oh, she's wearing a checky skirt. Oh no, hang on, it's a red skirt. Oh, hang on, it's a so and so." So you have to sort of put it into terms the best way that you can say. And this is the trouble with the dimensional idea. We understand the dimensions of space and time.
Right.
But what about the ones we don't understand? What about the dimension of light, which is where I think people like me are going, into a dimension of light and dark.
Okay.
There's, and we just haven't got the words.
Yeah.
We haven't
Well,
got a vocabulary.
Dan brings up some really good points in this discussion too. It's been proven it has, because they did, it was an experiment done in the 70s where they put atomic clocks in an airplane and on the ground, and they proved that the higher up you go, its time does slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, a scientific principle. And I agree, we don't know all of the answers yet. I mean, when you look at the string theory and they talk about six different dimensions on a string, and they talk about that, one of my favorite subjects, vibration and frequency. There it comes, that word again.
Everything is vibration.
Everything.
Absolutely. Everything is vibration and energy.
So
and that's what it comes down to.
So let's examine this for a second. Does this give us an answer as to what ghosts are? Is this a different dimension? Well,
No,
now hear me out. Is this the passing of our souls to these different dimensions?
We've hit,
or energies or whatever.
We've hit the word barrier again. And the word barrier comes in ghost.
Yeah,
What
okay.
do you mean by ghost?
Fair enough. When I was that, go ahead, Ryan.
I didn't hear him.
Ryan, what are you saying, bro? Can't hear you.
No, he's not there.
Not there. Okay. He must. Ryan, if you can hear us, turn up your mic a little bit, buddy. Yeah, in your, I apologize. I'm using that
no.
very
It's just
common term.
You're right. Is one of the things we can't use the term ghost.
You're 100% correct. The essence of our energy, our spirits, the spiritual world, where our energy goes after our physical bodies are not functioning on this plane anymore.
Even that's got problems?
Okay.
Even that's got problems because you have, there is a dimensional shift, if you like. I don't know if it's a dimension. I don't know if it's something different, but they go on. But they don't have to go on because some stay close to here in what is called a very dim, dark realm, hanging around our. These are the ones that people call what? Not residual hauntings.
Intelligent?
No. Sorry, it's late at night here. Trapped spirits.
Okay.
Once again, that's got problems because not everyone who's trapped is trapped, but the whole thing about the trap spirit is they haven't actually gone beyond. They've actually stayed linked to this vibration of existence that is us.
Hmm.
We're going well off topic here. Sorry.
Well, I don't think we are really. I think it is all on topic because when it comes to the slippage of time, is that an entrance into another dimension, and is that why we're seeing these spirits? Is that why we're in contact with them, because the dimension they are in has somehow phased with the current one? That's
This is something which I think about an awful lot.
Mhm.
It's trying to make sense of it. I mean, I used to think maybe it's an atmospheric thing, maybe something. I'm always looking for something that triggers. What's caused it. This is what I'm interested in. What has caused this event to happen? And when I have I've had 3 or 4 of these events in my life, and I can't find any trigger event. It just seems the only trigger event I can think of is I'm not concentrating on anything at the time. My mind is wandering.
And I think that's also a common thread with time slippages. If you look at the events that have occurred, people aren't focusing on they're not trying to make something happen. They're just carrying
No,
out their normal days, and bush, it happens.
it happens.
So I think
We come back to my answer for everything in the paranormal world, doesn't it? Shit happens. It literally, it just happens, and
Yeah.
you're not in control of it. And all you can do is ride the bucking horse until it stops, and hopefully you can get something out of it.
Well, yeah, and at this point, I think that's where we're at. But I also see a movement towards, maybe the scientific answers to time slippage, and comparing it with just what we would consider the paranormal. Maybe there's a connection between the two, or a bridge between the two that we're not seeing yet.
Absolutely, it's just a case of we're not understanding what's going on. I mean, when we understand what's going on, then people will just say, "Oh, well, it's just so and so's theory.
Yeah. Now
It's
there's
just this, that, and the other."
now let's kind of move this in for just a second to this time travel issue. Um, I don't know if you've ever seen it, and I am certainly not suggesting he's real, but there's this guy that pops up on YouTube. His name's Noah, and he claims to be a time traveler, and talking about time travel, and he said this several times, is going to be common knowledge and universally accepted by about 2028. Do you
Right.
see that? Do you see that happening? I'm taking him out of the picture. I'm just using him as the example of you. Do you see that happening?
The big problem of any time travel creating paradox.
Ah, yeah.
Now,
I think the example is killing your grandfather, and what would that?
yeah, creating paradox.
Mhm.
What would happen if you created a paradox? Does history suddenly get erased? And as history hasn't been erased, then paradoxes aren't being created. Therefore, nobody's coming back in time to kill someone.
But how do we know that?
Well, otherwise we'd have had a paradox.
How do we know we haven't had a paradox?
Well, creation hasn't suddenly gone out of existence.
Ah, but maybe
Oh, we're all on the spirit realm and we're just wandering around. We haven't realized. Of course, you've just solved it.
There you go. Hey, I noticed we've got some folks out there listening. Do you guys have any thoughts on this? This is really a subject of which nobody has a definitive answer. But have you had an experience with time slippage, or know somebody that has, or do you have thoughts on the theory? Jump on here. I'm watching the comments right now, so hop on and let us know a little bit more about your thoughts on it. I just think it's a fascinating issue, and people have talked about, like the friend of mine down in our area that walked out of a restaurant into an era that was in the 1900s. They immediately talk about some sort of spiritual event, but I'm not so sure it's spiritual anymore. I think it's more of it may be a mechanical thing of some type, and I know you disagree with me on that.
No,
but
no,
I'm
not
just
necessarily. It's just I want to know the mechanism. If it's not going to be a spiritual thing, what's the mechanism? And I can't identify a mechanism. Well, I don't know. I haven't got enough facts to even say, well, this could be a mechanism.
Yeah. Well, how does this fit in with our next topic, and that's synchronicity. I'm sorry.
Yes, it is.
Synchronicities.
Doesn't at all.
Okay. What's I have, being a cop for so many years, everything was very black and white for me. I needed evidence. I needed the fingerprints. I needed the blood. I needed the weapon. Those types of things that I could hold in my hand, take to court, and prove so and so committed this crime. It was it took a lot of time to evolve into believing that everything seems to have a thread.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Now we can kind of mess things up and cause the proper event to not occur for a while, but it seems like everything's water seeks its own level type of thing. It always ends up coming around. And this has been a really evolving thing for me personally, and I do believe that this is all part of a bigger picture. Your thoughts?
What synchronicities are, skeptics would say everything is a happenstance or a coincidence or something like this. A synchronicity was coined by Jung when he started doing his work into psychology, whereby something happens which has a definite meaning behind it happening. He's off. He's run away. I'm bored him to tears already.
No. I've got a book I wanted to bring up. Go ahead. I'm listening. Oh, if I've got it here, but I don't. It's in the other room. But I do have this one right here. I have not left, folks. Here we go. A little interesting. It's written by a good friend of mine named Doug Dillon, who is what I consider to be a local expert on synchronicities. But Carl Jung, Hauntings, and Paranormal Coincidences. I was just trying to pull that up. Sorry.
Right. If you take the synchronicity, it is an event which happens whereby there is a meaning behind it. I know that's a bit vague, so I'll give you an example. And it happened to me a year and a couple of weeks ago. I was asked to write an article for the Lancashire Evening Post for Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And it had to be 1,200 words or something. And they asked me for haunted airfields in the Lancashire area. Well, there's not very many haunted airfields in the area under study. So I'd written about 900 words, and I was scratching around, and I do mean scratching around at anything that I could find. And I went onto YouTube. I went onto Google, just put in haunted airfields like I usually do, and just go through all the permutations to try and find something at haunted airfields, Lancashire, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, there was one thing came up for RAF Wharton. I've never heard of RAF Wharton in my life. So I clicked on it, and it took me to an eBay listing for a piece of a newspaper cutting. RAF Wharton told me all about the ghost at RAF Wharton, which was a USAF base, all about what had been happening there. So I thought, that's brilliant, that's wonderful. I needed that. It completed the article. I went back the next day to try and find it, and it wasn't even on the net.
Really?
Yep, it wasn't anywhere. That's a complete synchronicity. I needed something, it was there. It's never been seen before. And how long have I been studying airfields? 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of this. I've never seen this. It was there one day, it was gone the next. But when I needed it, it was there.
And that's because you were supposed to find it.
I was supposed to find it. It was a guided like a coincidence, but something is guiding you to find something, to go along a certain path to do something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like the usual thing for synchronicities is where they say you think of someone, Auntie Ethel, and suddenly Auntie Ethel rings you on the telephone. That's the usual sort of synchronicity that you hear. Oh, I'm going to get a message from Auntie Ethel. But it goes far. There's another one when I was gigging in my archaeology days back in, oh God, when was this? Around about 1980. And we just walking back from one site through Dover, and I was thinking, I am absolutely starving hungry, and I'm as thirsty as anything, because we were miles out from anywhere, and we were actually sort of marching back at the end of the day. And there on the pavement, just in front of me, was a whole grapefruit.
Mm.
Untouched, not fallen out, not bruised, not nothing. Right on the what you call the sidewalk, sorry, was a grapefruit. So I peeled the grapefruit, ate the grapefruit. Fine. Synchronicity.
Now,
I
see,
wanted something, it was there.
in Florida, finding a grapefruit like that wouldn't be a big deal, but in your neck of the woods, suddenly seeing a grapefruit
In my neck of the woods, it's a big deal. I mean, not too many shops in the 1980s sold grapefruits.
Yeah.
And it was there. It was sitting right in my path as I went up while I was thinking hard on how much I could do with a cup of tea and something to eat.
Well, and I, as in law enforcement, have had those same type, not necessarily food, but those same types of things happen, where cases that I'm about ready to give up on. I'm thinking of one in particular that involved an individual who had harmed a lot of kids. Okay, what most of my work in law enforcement dealt with with crimes against children, and I was at a dead end on this case, and then suddenly something just told me something that my boss came to me and said, Larry, look, you've taken this as far as you can. You've done everything you could. Time to wrap this up, man. You can. I said, boss, I just need another day. Something told me, just wait.
Mm-hmm.
That afternoon, out of the blue, I got a lead that took me to somebody that said, yep, I was with this guy when he did A, B, and C. Boom. How does that, I've been looking for weeks. I've been working on this case for months, rather. How did this suddenly happen when I'm about ready to pull the plug?
Yeah.
So,
synchronicity.
yeah.
It's a complete synchronicity.
Listen, I'm going to take a quick brief here. Mike Spanky Maxwell has joined us. Oh, wow. Debbie, hey, Debbie Enzi, that's Ike's wife. Ike just had some more eye surgery, buddy. Sorry about that. Hope you're feeling better. Hope you recover quickly. Glad you're watching, and thanks, Deb, for jumping on and letting us know. Our thoughts are with you, pal. IDK Paranormal, folks. Make sure you check out his website.
It's well worth going along because
Yeah.
he's got some fascinating stories.
Yeah, he does. So check that out. Hope you're feeling better tomorrow, pal. He's 30 some odd years in law enforcement, getting ready to retire soon. So God bless you, Ike. Also, Dan, we're gonna go back at the end of the show. I've got a couple things from Judge Dredd, Paul.
That's
and
Paul. Yeah.
Yep, and Dan Clarkson that has some interesting stuff coming up on time slips. Dan also talks about his ex-girlfriend was visiting Africa, and they climbed on top of a mountain looking out, and he looks down to find a polished stone that had been used as a hand tool thousands and thousands of years before. How did he just happen to find that while visiting this place in Africa? So synchronicity, excuse me. How do you think that kind of connects with the paranormal, though, Chris? What are your
Well,
I've got my thoughts. Yeah.
I think everything's paranormal until proven otherwise. And as I've said earlier on, the paranormal is just science that we don't understand.
And I think that people sometimes look for a bigger definition of that word than there is. You're right. Paranormal is anything not explained by science.
Yeah.
People automatically hear paranormal, they think ghosts. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's just something that cannot be explained by science. So your point is well taken. I've come to believe that synchronicity is the other side trying to hit us up alongside the head and say, look, I need you to go in this direction.
Yep, I'd agree. It's a message. Well, not all the time, but as I said, the grapefruit isn't a message. The grapefruit was just there because I needed a grapefruit. But yeah, a lot of the time it's a message. It's to say, don't go left, go right.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're not assuming that we're not pig-headed enough to say, well, bugger you, I'm going to go right anyway.
Well, that's what happens with us most of the time, especially guys. We're just so dang stubborn. We're going to do what we want to do. Synchronicity. Have you ever had a specific incident involving synchronicities and your work with your visions, with the paranormal? Anything specific?
You ask me at 12:30 at night.
Well, dude, I expect you to be on the job, man. Come on.
Yeah, but you're not paying.
I'll send you Get some beer.
Lots of times when I was nursing, this is going into a yet another previous life, you'd get a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Really, you'd get a feeling, and you'd go walking out up the ward, and someone's dead or someone's on the verge of dying. You just get that feeling that I've got to go for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best that I can think. Me, you've got to go. In archaeology, which is yet another lifetime, um, I could tell you. Well, this is probably me being medium rather than anything else. I could tell you where there was a grave.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so obvious to me because I could smell it. Nobody else could smell it, but I could smell it, and it smelled like you know. Well, yeah. Over here, we some of our old churches have got a particular smell, and it's very musty and it's very damp and it's mouldy and it's I can't describe it. I mean, anybody over here will tell you exactly what I'm talking about. But it's
Mm-hmm.
old, dusty, musty, mouldy smell that everybody
Mm-hmm.
says it smells like an old church.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what graves smell like to me. They smell like an old church. So I can walk over a site and say, there's a grave there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just things like this happen to me sort of all the time. Any other sort of synchronicities in what I've done? No, I can't think of anything.
Well, in cop work, we run into it too. I know I can attest to this. I can think of one incident. I was a rookie cop in particular, where we got called to a house, domestic type thing. Wife comes out. He's in the house. He's got a gun, and I to make a long story very, very short, the guy popped himself just as we were coming in the door. But I did something that almost got myself killed because I was young and I was inexperienced, but something held me up just long enough, and gut instinct, gut feeling, you know, not
Excuse me.
wanting to stop this car. Something just doesn't seem right about this
Ike,
car.
Ike was talking about this in one of his videos as well, where he walked up to, he stopped a
Yeah.
car speeding or something, and there
Oh,
were
that's
four
right.
guys in it, and he just sort of said, I'm not going to do anything. He just had
Yeah.
this. And then he says there's another one where, for no apparent reason, he approached the car on the passenger side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And looking in the car, there was a guy in there with a shotgun in his lap.
Right.
Now, that's a synchronicity.
Exactly. So is that the other side? And I think it is. It's the other side saying it maybe a guardian angel. Is it synchronized? A guardian angel? It's the other side speaking to us.
If we'll listen. That's what it always comes down to. If we'll listen.
Well, and that's in my business. That's what saves us a lot of times.
That's what
Not
you'd
only
call our
safety,
gut instinct, isn't it?
gut instinct. Yeah, just
Yeah,
something isn't right. You know,
something's not right.
wait, look around the corner. Wait for backup, whatever. So there's no question about that. In the paranormal world, I got to tell you, there's just been times Ryan and I were just talking about it. We just decided to start doing an active listening session next to this an old dairy barn. It was on the Tripson Sexton Dairy here in Vero Beach, and we just decided to go to this one spot to do an active listening session, and then suddenly uh, we hear a noise, and the noise is of a door opening. We notice on the other side of the building is another group, and we think it's them, but as it turns out, they think it's us, and there was no door being open in that place at all. Yet we were both all in the same spot at that same time to experience uh, that event. Were we all supposed to be there to hear it? Um, we've also had some very interesting events where folks that have lost loved ones suddenly those were called to a spot, and we get some sort of evidence, whether it be an EVP or some sort of a hit on our equipment that brings it into focus. I don't know, all gut
Well,
feeling, all things strung together.
I can give you one which was a message, and
Okay.
it's a very clear message which I received. And it must have been when I was 18,
Mm-hmm.
and I was mucking around on a motorbike on the cliff tops. You know the White Cliffs of Dover?
Yep.
parts around there. When I was 18, you could just ride your bike up or down these paths, and you just ride around the paths, doing a bit of scrambling. Do you call it scrambling, or I don't know, just riding rough and jumping it
Right.
around and being an arsehole, 18-year-old.
Careful.
And I
Family stuff.
thought I was just aiming for the sort of humps and bumps and just launching the bike off and landing it, and it's how you learn how to ride a motorbike, really.
Hmm.
And I saw this hump, and I thought, right, I'm gonna jump off that hump, and we'll see where we go from there. And there was this voice, and it just said no. And I couldn't operate the motorbike. It was just no.
Hmm.
So I got off the motorbike, and I went and had a look. It was the edge of the cliff.
Really?
Yep, 200-foot drop straight off.
Yeah, that might have hurt.
It might have hurt a little bit. Well, it wouldn't hurt me. It would ruin the bike, but it wouldn't do anything to me. 18-year-olds, you're indestructible, man.
Yeah, I hear you.
But that's what I consider that gut instinct. Something is saying no. You don't get on that bus. You don't get on that train. You don't get in that car.
Hmm. So, folks that are out there listening, we got a number of folks out there listening to us tonight. Synchronicity. How has that affected you, either in your personal life, or during a paranormal investigation? And what are your thoughts as to whether or not it's the other side directing us or just giving us information? Would like to hear something from you guys. Now, I'm going to move back to Dan just a quick second here. Actually, it was Paul made a comment here. First of all, Paul talks about a colleague, and then we're going to go back a little bit here to the time slips issue, which whole bag of worms we opened with that. A colleague of mine, says Paul, apparently experienced a time slip at a local ruin, and it was Kinloss Abbey. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Okay. Kinloss, yeah.
It was in the evening when suddenly she said the abbey was bathed in light and the ruin was in its former glory.
That's the one.
Okay.
That's a really good example of a time slip.
Okay. Now, was that the other side wanting him to see it, or was it that just two dimensions interacting?
Two dimensions interacting, I'd say.
So is it spirit? Let's not say paranormal. Is it spiritual or scientific?
What's the difference?
Don't know. That's another great question. Okay.
What's the difference? Just, people have a go at me and people like me, but it's just a case of they've been told that it doesn't exist by scientists who aren't prepared to look beyond boundaries.
Let me ask you this. We all know, I think it's fairly common knowledge that while we use 100% of our brain, we only know about what 20% of it actually does. Are there people, yourself maybe included, that just have that innate ability to switch, to be able to see that other dimension, rather than it being strictly scientific? Could it be a combination of a person having the right synapses in the brain, if this makes sense, to make the transition between dimensions? Or is it spiritual, the other side saying, I want you to see this? Does that make sense?
Yes and no.
This is getting deep, I guess, right?
It's yes and no. It depends how you identify with consciousness.
Okay.
There are those classic scientific thought that consciousness exists within the brain, that the brain and mind are one. There are others where brain and mind are completely separate, and there are others where brain and mind are completely separate and memory is stored outside of the body within another dimension.
Yes, I've actually heard those theories. Yeah.
Which that's the position which I favor rather than anything else. Now, people who get in touch with spirits, etc., just have a better connection with that outside, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily that they're born with a better connection, but they establish a better connection by doing. It's like any muscle. You work the muscle, you get better at using that muscle. So even you say you're as psychic as a brick. I'd like to
I
get
am.
you on. I'd like to get you on one of my sites, and we'll have an evening working with you. And by the end of that, I guarantee you'll be doing things. You'll be saying, "Oh, hang on, I've just had the image of."
Well, and I'm not saying that's not possible. I mean, I have had enough instances in my life where, like I said, don't go into that building just yet, or don't, wait for the backup before you. Something, enough things have happened to me that I've always passed off as being that gut instinct. But maybe that sixth sense is something spiritual in nature.
Mhm.
I don't know. Going back, Dan also mentioned, we're getting back to the time slip thing. Could a lot of the cryptid sightings be time slips? Pterodactyl
There's
sightings, Loch Ness.
there's a lot of thought gone into this, and I will definitely not say no. I think that yeah, it could very well be. Um, there's a big dichotomy going on between the flesh and bloodists and the dimensionalists. So the
Give me a
flesh and
better
bloodists,
description. Yeah, give me a better description of a flesh and blood.
every cryptid that you see, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, etc., is a flesh and blood creature. It exists. It lives now. It's living in the forests. Blah 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 blah. There's the dimensionalists who are saying they might be living in the forest, but they actually come through and go back and come through and go back.
But that suggests an intelligent ability to do that. If they,
then you get it's not that easy. Then you get the UFO school,
okay.
where these cryptids are actually coming through via UFOs.
Well, now and you
And then of
we could,
course you've got skinwalkers. So it's everything that you do is is a real can of worms. Everything.
yes, Dan, Bigfoot is real, buddy. Don't worry, Bigfoot is real. um,
I'm not saying it's not real.
oh no, I know. I'm just
Don't
Dan.
get me wrong with that.
No,
It's I'm not saying it's not real. It's just we're arguing about the nature
semantics,
of
really.
reality.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
well
you're
said.
talking to someone who's had an experience, so I know they're real.
No,
It's
I'm
just
just. Dan was kidding on there, and I was just teasing him back a little bit. Reality. What is reality? That's a whole different subject we
oh
could get to.
oh
What is reality?
that's going far too deep for me. What is
Yeah.
reality? Because
This time of night for both
I
of us.
have enough trouble trying to find out what my life is, let alone reality.
Well, but you talk about aliens now. According to all the laws, current laws of physics that are based upon Einstein's theories, if you move, the speed of light is constant. You can't change it no matter what. But the faster you go, the more mass you create. And when you hit the speed of light, you are at infinite speed and you are at infinite mass, which would not allow us to go further. That's where a lot of theorists believe that we can't travel the speed of light, therefore there cannot be UFOs. However, there talk about those wormholes, which is a whole different thing. And is that how some of this is occurring? There's a couple
or
different theories.
or
Yeah,
the
right.
UFOs are coming through on a dimensional shift.
Well, and if you go back to the could be as many.
Or as I've heard, they're actually from the future coming back and looking at us. I've heard that as well.
Well, and there is talk, there is theory that traveling backwards in the future is a whole lot easier than going forward in the future. The only way you can go forward is through the wormholes, but you can go backwards. So, once again, a deep subject to get into. But where does the reality meet the spiritual here? And I don't know. I've seen a lot of people recently connect UFOs. I won't say ghosts, I'll say spirits, but UFOs, spirits, and Bigfoot all within the dimensional realm.
Not,
And
I wouldn't. I can't
I'm
say
just,
yes and I can't say no. That's as simple as it gets. I cannot say yes and I cannot say no because I don't know enough.
would you agree then? Would you agree? And this goes back to my evidence based philosophy towards investigations. Would you agree that that might be a great place to start uh, the foundation of an investigation? Would you agree?
First of all, you've got to find a way of identifying dimensions.
Okay. Well, if
And as we can't, let's face it, we're fishing in the dark.
we are,
You can't
no
you can't
question.
see the float, you can't feel the line, you can't see the rod. We're fishing in the dark, complete and utter dark. And all of a sudden, something comes up producing its own light, and we go, "Oh, look, fish!" And that's where we are. We're no
Okay.
further along. We're no further along now than we were in the Victorian era, and that is really depressing.
That is sad when you think about it.
It's really depressing.
And that kind of gets me into a bugaboo where I'm at now with like our equipment. You know, some of our equipment has improved. Some of it looks prettier than it used to. Maybe a few lights and bells and whistles on it. But most of our equipment hasn't changed in 20 years.
No, a lot of it hasn't really changed since the Victorian era. They were still using lights. They were still using bells. They were still using this and that. All we're doing is exactly the same with modern components. We haven't invented anything. I think one of the very few things that we invented that was different was Raw Dive doing his EVPs, which has given us come through to spirit boxes and apps. How well they work is up to personal interpretation. But I've seen a lot of evidence to say that they do. On occasion, they do work.
I firmly believed, based upon the theories of vibration, frequency, what Rodive has done, Jorgensen, Tesla, I think what all of them, I feel that that's where we're going to get the biggest break.
Audio is definitely the way forward. Audio, now, not visual, audio. Although, so saying, I mean, I've seen some pretty unbelievable things.
Well, like I said, we had we did an investigation Monday night. We were at a local community center in Vero, and we did an early evening investigation. Excuse me. And there was evidence of a fire in there. One of my team members, Mark Holt, asked the question during an EVP session, you know, do you know if anybody died in the fire that was here? And we, of course, didn't hear it till we played it back, but you got a very gravelly voice that came back clear as a bell. You just listened to it yourself. Yeah, and it was Alice.
Yeah.
Now, turns out that next to this community center, back in the 30s when this fire occurred, was a zoo, and in the zoo was a bear by the name of Alice. Now, is that connected? Is there synchronicity there? We don't know, but that was a very, very clear EVP. Okay, that was a message of some sort to us, and what it is we haven't figured out yet. But that piece of evidence during that investigation, if you know, we need to start looking into it, and that might be a key. That might have been a synchronistic of you know, piece of evidence that we got in answer to a question that we can maybe put something together.
As always, I get a lot of people ask me, "Oh, you've gone to Richmond Castle," just off the top of my head, Richmond Castle, and you've got a name of so and so and so and so come up. Have you tried to find the name? Well, okay, Richmond Castle, take the example, was built in the 1000s, was lived in until, I mean, it was still being used as a prison camp until the Second World War for objectors and defaulters. It could be anyone from all that time. And then you consider that 90% of humanity is not recorded anyway.
Yep.
So you're absolutely on a hiding to nothing. To try, when people say, "Have you looked into this?" You're on a hiding to nothing unless it comes back with a name that you can identify, someone really important. Then you're not going to get anything. I mean, ones I can identify: Middleham Castle. I've had King Richard. Identifiable, bang. Elvington, Sergeant Fury.
Sergeant Fury. That was, I witnessed that one. That was pretty.
Even found the grave. Identifiable.
Yes,
but that was only because I knew the squadron, I knew the name, and I could go and look.
Yeah, that was real quick for those of you that didn't hear it. I was with Ryan and I were with Chris and RAF Elvington during our trip to England, and we got the name Fury, Sergeant Fury, during an EVP session. And Chris was able to find out that this Sergeant Fury died during the Battle of Britain.
Yep.
And he flew with this squadron that we were in their Nissen hut that was dedicated to them. That was pretty darn cool. Real quick, I want to mention M18 tank destroyer.
Oh, hey, excellent. Another one of mine.
Excellent. Yeah, wants to make mention that Dover Castle in Kent is a good for time slip events. Man, can you tell us how, real quick? I mean, if you're still listening out there, M18, why is it a good place for time slips? And are you familiar with it at all, Chris?
They claim an awful lot in the World War II tunnels. There's three
Oh.
levels of the tunnels which are visitable. There's still two, Dumpy and Esplanade, which are off limits. Esplanade they can't get into. Dumpy is still covered by official secrets.
Oh.
Dover Castle itself, so there's things going on in the World War II rooms. They say I went through there and I felt nothing. Dover Castle is very active. For me, the most active part was the medieval tunnels, which actually go past a bottle dungeon and then down a spiral staircase and out through the walls. And I found that a very interesting place.
Mm-hmm.
But getting back to another sighting, which I had many, many years ago when I was digging in Dover, in the archaeology unit, we had storerooms up at the castle in the Georgian barracks blocks. And the barracks blocks were okay, but they felt really creepy at times. You know, you get there at the wrong time and it felt really off. And periodically we'd have to take stuff out and we'd have to go up onto a piece of rough ground in Dover, which you couldn't do now, of course, but a piece of rough ground up in the castle and burn the rubbish. And this was near an old lookout station, which sort of concrete thing at the top of the cliffs where you'd look out across the channel. And on one occasion, I actually saw a chap in a naval greatcoat with a set of brass-looking binoculars, or at least there was brass in them. Huge things, really huge things, looking out over the channel.
Mm-hmm.
And then he actually turned, looked at me, and faded. That was just one of these. Well, you know, Dover Castle's got some real. Was that a time slip? I don't know. Was it just?
Yeah, and that's a great question. That's a great question. Are sometimes the ghosts that we see
Stop ghosts.
simply
Apparitions?
I'm sorry, apparitions.
Spirits?
Sorry, you're right. Are the apparitions that are sometimes seen? Are they just the victims of a time slip?
Yeah, this is something I've argued as well. I mean, ages ago, I posed the question to you. I think when you were over here, we know that I'm going to use that term ghosts. I'm going to use it because we know that because everybody uses it. We know that ghosts on occasion have form. They look three-dimensional, solid.
Yep.
On occasion, they have mass, i.e., they'll sit on a bed, the bed springs go down. Mm-hmm. On occasion, they have smell, perfumes with them.
Absolutely.
On occasion, they talk to you. All these are known. If you walk down the street and you see someone on the other side of the road, solid-looking figure, you don't interact with them, you don't do anything else, you walk straight past, and if you turn around and they're not there, how do you know that we'd automatically assume they've gone into a shop, they've jumped on a bus, they've got in a taxi, they've gone up a little alleyway. How do you know they're not a ghost? Just someone walking down the street.
But I think we actually have hit an important point here. We talk about us experiencing time slips and going into past events. Maybe, just maybe, what we're experiencing in the way of apparitions, ghosts, spirits, whatever, maybe they're in the same thing. If it's not a spirit that we recognize that should have been there, such as Aunt Margaret who passed away,
Mm-hmm.
just maybe that naval officer you saw with the glasses looking out over the cliffs.
Might have been a time slip.
Might have been a time. I think that is an interesting concept that I think might be something for us as a group, as a field of paranormal investigators to maybe start investigating. I do got to mention M18 came back on when I asked about what about Dover Castle. He mentions people visiting the castle have seen tortured folk in cages, dying in pain, and then the ghost will vanish. M18, I got to ask you, man, could that be a time slip on their end? Are they somehow coming through to us? I don't know, guys. That's the best thing, the most interesting, fun thing about what we do is that we don't know yet.
Haven't got all
We
the
just don't.
answers.
We have
Literally.
not got all the
Don't
answers.
don't look
God.
at me for all the answers I can't give them. I mean, what we're saying there about Dover Castle, I can relate to Norwich Castle.
Mhm.
Um, I was walking around Norwich Castle. When was this? Oh, it's got to be in the mid 1980s. Just a visit to Norwich Castle while I was in Norfolk, and walking around. And the dungeons was off limits because they were doing something down there, and I really wanted to get down there, and I was really peed off about this. I paid my money, and I wanted to go to those dungeons, and I couldn't go to them. And I was just sort of standing on one of the floors, and all of a sudden, a man in I don't know, a tunic, so maybe 13th, anywhere between 10th and 13th, 14th
Mhm.
century, fell straight past me and vanished as he went below the floor line.
Did he have anything around his neck?
Nope, it just almost as though it's been thrown off.
Okay. Okay.
It was so vivid, but then just vanished, gone. So was that a time slip? Was that a synchronicity? Was that um,
Just a
just an
spirit.
apparition?
Just an
Was it a
apparition. I almost
spirit?
said it again.
Was it a
Mhm.
time? Was it a residual? As we'll use your terms. Well, I can't say. All I can say is I saw, and this is the problem. It comes down to the anecdotal. I saw.
And you're 100% right. And folks, that's once again one of the really interesting things about our field is most of us have experienced things. We've seen things that we can't explain. We're still searching for answers. The key, in my humble opinion, is for all of us to begin to work together to
Mhm.
collect this data, to talk about it, and try to put the pieces of the greatest puzzle known to mankind together. What is on the other side? What are these events that we're experiencing? And the only
Absolutely.
way and the only way we can do that is to work together. Talk it on this show. That's why we're so glad you guys are here, because we're talking on the show, just throwing out ideas. None of us know the answers. None of us know where it's all going to go. But by talking, by working together, not against each other, that's how we end up finding the answers. And I hate to say this, but man, that hour went quick. Sorry, we were real heavy early on with the scientific stuff. We could go on for hours with that. But time to sign off. So, Chris, any final words?
No, can I go to bed now?
Yes, you may go to bed now.
Thank
Wham,
you very
wham.
much.
Man, oh man. But folks, thanks for watching us. We will not be here next week. Here in the States, it's Thanksgiving, so we're not going to be on the air.
What is Thanksgiving?
Oh boy, now you're going to open up another can of worms that could go a whole bunch of different directions. But
We're giving
essentially,
thanks
it
for
is.
food.
Say what, Ryan?
We are giving thanks for
We're
food.
giving thanks. We're giving thanks for the good things that have happened to us, essentially, and it
Right.
goes back to the Puritans being in New England in the 1600s, and it had to do with them making friends with the indigenous people there. That can open up a whole bunch of worms. So we're
That
not,
that
we're
that that's dodgy ground.
dodgy ground. Yes, yes, but that's where it's foundation. It's a big holiday here in the states.
Here's sorry. I have to ask this because they've just asked from the other side. Do the indigenous natives have a Thanksgiving Day as well?
That's a great
It's
question.
an That's a great question, one of which I am going to dodge. I don't know. Um, here's the kicker. I'm going to get a little political. We're all Americans, and regardless of what happened, we can't change what happened in the past.
You
I don't
cannot
know.
change the
We
past.
cannot
Full
change the past.
stop.
All we can do is come together as one today, and that's all we can do. So
You
yeah,
you
I would
can't. There's no point being revisionist on all of
Yeah.
this. It
exactly.
happened.
It
You
happened.
can't put your head in the sand and ignore it. You have
So
to come to terms with it and say it happened. They're not the same people as us.
So I would assume, in answer to your question, that yes, we as a country need to come together and be thankful for what we have as a country, and drop all this silly politicizing of events, and just say thank God we've got a country where we can do this. That's my American comment for today. Ryan, were you trying to say something? Oh, okay, cool. I'm going to drop it there for this thing
No.
gets any deeper. Um,
No.
uh, Thanks for giving us smallpox. Yeah, the Europeans did that to us, right, Dan? You're right. Oh well. Um, Today is today. Thanks, my Spanky. Thank you, buddy. Today is today. Americans, we are Americans, and we need to come together as Americans and stop all
I'm
this.
not. No,
Chris,
no, no, I'm not.
Well,
no.
that's very
you
insensitive
guys
of
are.
you.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about Americans. We all just need to come together. That's all I'm saying. Oh, well. Anyway, today, as Spanky says, we got to go, guys, before I get myself in deeper trouble. Thank you for watching. We will not be here next week, but we will be back in 2 weeks. Please join us, like us, subscribe to us. There's going to be things coming with the subscriptions when we get up the line a little bit. We'll talk about that as we get closer. So please listen, spread the word. This is the place we want folks to come to and talk about the paranormal, give us our thoughts. Maybe this will be the beginning of collecting that evidence and these thoughts together, all together, so that we can begin to find the answers. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Any parting words, Christopher?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. If you like us, tell your friends. If you don't like us, tell your enemies.
All right, guys, take care. Good night. Happy holidays to us here in the States. Other than that, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good night, all.